On a map, this part of Australia looks like it should be full of people. The coastline stretches for thousands of miles. The ocean is rich. The land behind it looks wide, flat, and open. And geographically, it sits right between Eastern Australia and Western Australia, two sides of the continent that cannot simply ignore each other. But between Adelaide and Perth, there is no major city, no major port, no large population center growing out of the kind of geography that, in many other parts of the world, usually creates cities. What you find instead are cliffs, wind, and one question that is much harder to answer than it seems. Why? To understand it, we have to start with one of the easiest mistakes people make when they look at a map. Not every coastline is an invitation to build a city. This region is called the Great Australian Bight. A bight is basically a broad curve or open bay along a coastline. And behind the northern edge of this bight lies one of Australia's strangest landscapes, the Nullarbor Plain. The name Nullarbor comes from Latin, nulla arbor, meaning no trees, and in this case, that name is not poetic. It is almost brutally literal. For hundreds of miles, the land stretches out with almost no trees tall enough to offer shade. But the lack of trees is not the main problem. The real problem is what happens when that flat land finally reaches the sea. Along most coastlines in the world, the land gradually slopes down toward the water. You get beaches, small bays, river mouths, estuaries, or natural harbors where ships can anchor and people can build. Here, the limestone plain simply stops, then it drops, straight down into the Southern Ocean. These are the Bunda Cliffs, a long wall of limestone running along Australia's southern coast. In some places, the cliffs rise more than 200 feet above the ocean, stretching for hundreds of miles along the edge of the continent. A major coastal city needs an easy meeting point between land and sea. Ships need to come in, cargo needs to move off the water, people need to travel from the port into the interior. But along much of the Great Australian Bight, the thing standing between the land and the ocean is not a beach, a harbor, or a dock. It is a wall of limestone, and the water below is not exactly welcoming either. The Southern Ocean is one of the most exposed bodies of water on Earth. Powerful westerly winds sweep across the lower latitudes with very little land to slow them down. That creates long, heavy swells that can be extremely dangerous, especially for smaller vessels. Ironically, that same harsh ocean helps make this place incredibly alive. Strong water movement brings nutrients up from the deep. That helps make the Great Australian Bight one of the most important marine habitats in Australia. Southern right whales return to these waters. Australian sea lions feed along this coast. Many species in the region are found nowhere else, but cities are not built for whales. The second problem is harder to see and even more important. Under the surface of the Nullarbor Plain is a vast karst landscape formed from limestone over millions of years. When rain falls here, it does not behave the way it does in many other places. It does not easily gather into big rivers. Much of it seeps into cracks in the rock, slowly dissolving the limestone, carving caves, tunnels, sinkholes, and underground passages hidden from the surface. In other words, the Nullarbor is not just dry, it hides its water. For a city, that is a life or death problem. A coastline is not enough. A city needs fresh water that is available year-round, large enough for many people, and easy enough to access at scale. Big rivers are one reason so many of the world's great cities grew in the same places for thousands of years. Here, there is no great river. There is limestone that swallows water before people can easily collect it. The clearest example is the Eyre Peninsula in South Australia. This area is much more developed than the central Nullarbor. It has towns like Port Lincoln, Whyalla, and Ceduna. It has ports. It has agriculture. It has fishing. But even here, water has never been a fully solved problem. Tens of thousands of water customers on the peninsula depend on groundwater basins with limited capacity. As groundwater levels fall and salinity rises, the government of South Australia eventually approved a desalination plant at Billy Lights Point, turning seawater into drinking water because other sources are no longer enough. If small cities and towns already need desalination just to keep going, imagining a major metropolis here starts to feel like it is fighting against the basic logic of the land. And in South Australia, that logic has been visible for a long time. Human settlement here is not decided only by how close a place is to the ocean. There is another boundary that matters much more: rain. In the 19th century, a surveyor named George Goyder mapped a line across South Australia. It became known as Goyder's Line. The purpose was simple: to separate land that was relatively safe for farming from land that was too dry for intensive agriculture. For more than a century, that line has remained surprisingly important. South of the line, farming is more possible. North of it, the risk of drought becomes much more serious. No one guards that line. There is no fence, no checkpoint, no sign telling you that life has just become harder. But when the bad seasons come, the line decides which farms can survive and which ones are abandoned. The Eyre Peninsula sits on the more workable side of that divide. It produces wheat, barley, canola, and livestock. Port Lincoln is known as one of Australia's seafood capitals, especially for southern bluefin tuna, oysters, and other valuable marine products. But wealth does not automatically create population density. This region does have an economy, and in some areas that economy is very valuable. The problem is that it does not work like the economy of a major city. Broadacre farming needs huge amounts of land, heavy machinery, grain storage, and export routes. It does not need thousands of workers packed together like an industrial city. Modern fishing works the same way. It needs boats, docks, cold storage, processing facilities, and specialized workers. But it does not require a massive urban population. Mining in the wider region can also generate a lot of money. But modern mining is often more capital-intensive than people-intensive. Equipment, logistics, and specialized labor matter more than huge permanent settlements. Many workers can come in for work, then leave again, so wheat, seafood, and minerals can move out to global markets. But the towns stay small. Calling this place empty, though, would be a serious mistake. Long before railroads, highways, desalination plants, or modern energy projects, people lived here, just in a very different way. Aboriginal peoples, including the Mirning and other groups connected to the Nullarbor and the Great Australian Bight, developed deep knowledge of the land. They knew where hidden water could be found. They understood caves, seasons, travel routes, animals, and coastal patterns that do not appear on ordinary maps. One of the strongest pieces of evidence is Coonalda Cave, an important cave system in the Nullarbor region. Inside, researchers found finger markings on limestone walls believed to be tens of thousands of years old. Sites like this changed the way scholars understood the age and depth of human occupation in Australia. To European explorers, the Nullarbor looked like an empty wasteland. To people who understood the landscape, it was full of signs that had to be read correctly. Rock holes that could hold rainwater, seasonal routes, cave systems, and a sacred relationship with the whales that returned to the waters of the Bight at certain times of the year. So the Nullarbor was never truly empty. A better way to say it is this: the region is extremely difficult to inhabit, using the model of a modern city. But as a human landscape, it had stories, knowledge, and meaning thousands of years before the first modern towns appeared here. When European colonization pushed farther across Australia, this region was treated less like a place to build and more like an obstacle to survive. One of the clearest examples came in 1841, when Edward John Eyre tried to prove whether southern Australia could be crossed from Adelaide toward Western Australia. He hoped to find a route supported by water, grass, and maybe even future settlements. He found almost the opposite. The journey became a fight for survival. His party ran short of water, supplies were running out. The country offered very few signs of easy life. In that situation, Aboriginal knowledge of hidden water sources became critical. Without the ability to read rock holes, old routes, and small signs in a dry landscape, Eyre's journey may not have ended with him alive. That experience made something clear. The region was not a natural foundation for a new chain of cities, so what people built later was not a city. They built ways to cross it. The Trans-Australian Railway was completed in 1917, stretching about 1,052 miles through one of the most isolated parts of the continent. To an American audience, that is roughly like building a rail line from New York City to Orlando, but across a far emptier landscape. And inside that route is one of the strangest pieces of railroad engineering in the world, a perfectly straight section of track about 297 miles long. That is roughly the distance from Boston to Philadelphia. But imagine doing that with almost no major towns, no big cities, and almost no meaningful turns. Just a rail line running straight across the empty Nullarbor. The The railway was important for national unity. It helped connect Western Australia to the eastern states, but its purpose was not to fill the Nullarbor with people. Its purpose was to connect the places on either side of it. The air highway later reinforced the same pattern. It became one of the great road routes between South Australia and Western Australia, including a straight section of road about 90 miles long that is now one of the icons of Australian road travel. In the Nullarbor, roads and railways do not prove the land is full of life. They often prove how empty the land around them is. There are roadhouses, fuel stops, and small settlements that survive because travelers need to stop for a while, fill the tank, buy food, rest, then keep going. Infrastructure here is not the root of a growing city. It is the thread tying two sides of the continent together. But the story of this region is not finished, and the final chapter may be the most surprising. In the 21st century, the emptiness that once made this place seem useless is starting to look valuable. The world is searching for huge areas for renewable energy. Wind turbines need open land. Solar panels need strong sun exposure without constant conflict with crowded development. And producing green hydrogen and green ammonia requires electricity on a scale that cannot easily be supplied by small plots of land near major cities. On paper, the remote country around the Nullarbor offers a lot of what developers want. The land is vast, the population is sparse, the winds are strong, the sun is abundant. That is why projects like the Western Green Energy Hub have been proposed, one of the largest renewable energy proposals in the world. If fully developed, it could help turn one of the emptiest regions in Australia into one of the biggest clean energy machines in the Indo-Pacific. This is where the logic of the Nullarbor turns in a way that is hard to predict. For nearly 2 centuries, the qualities of this place, remote, vast, harsh, and empty, were seen as disadvantages. In the age of clean energy, those same qualities can become selling points. But that creates a new question. If a place is hard to live in, does that mean it is easy to sacrifice? Under the surface of the Nullarbor are fragile cave systems, fossils, records of ancient climate, and underground species that evolved in darkness over enormous stretches of time. Above it are Indigenous lands and histories that cannot be replaced by a project map. If millions of solar panels, thousands of turbines, access roads, pipelines, worker camps, and industrial facilities enter a landscape like this, the impact cannot be treated as small. In the end, this giant coastline is neither truly empty nor truly failed. It rejects major cities because it was never equipped for them. The cliffs are too difficult for ports. The water is too hidden underground. The economy is too spread out to concentrate people. The distances are too large to overcome at a reasonable cost. But that is exactly why this place teaches something ordinary maps often hide. Not every coastline invites a city. Not every resource creates population density. And not every place that looks empty is meaningless. Between Adelaide and Perth, Australia holds one of its quietest but harshest reminders. Sometimes a place becomes important, not because people manage to fill it, but because it forces them to understand their limits.